Howdy, it's Jim Morado, and I'm driving around my old stomping grounds of Owensboro, Kentucky. Filmed this March 2020, not too long ago. I came home. I always refer to Owensboro as home because it's where I grew up, it's where my family's still at. Even though I live and spend most of my time in Lexington these days, I still think of going home as going to Owensboro. And actually, I grew up out outside about 10 miles out of Owensboro, but I went to school in Owensboro, hung out in Owensboro, and I think of this as my hometown in a lot of ways. And right now, just driving down one of the main streets, just videotaped quite a bit, and I was thinking about the retail in Owensboro. A very fast food friendly town, as you can tell by most of these signs going through. Had a lot of shifting retail going on. I know everything's out on 54 anymore, but I always think of Frederica, as kind of a main street in town. Spent a lot of time driving up and down this street in my days. Right now, I don't. I'm probably going to turn it down or mute it. But I was listening to the Eagles in the City, which is a song that I remember me and my buddy Brent listening to a lot as we were growing up. We loved the Eagles, and In the City was just a great song. Kind of an anti-city song. And I don't think of Owensboro as a big city at all. At the time I did, because we lived in the country and we would go into Owensboro and we would say, hey, let's go to town. Like Owensboro was town. Like that was very city, very urban to us at the time. And now I don't think of it that way at all, especially after, living 10 years in Cleveland, Ohio, and even longer than that in Lexington, Kentucky now. Wow, look at that line wrapped around Wendy's and Denny's. We used to hang out at a place called Paco's that was right next to Denny's growing up. Anybody remember Paco's? It was a Mexican place that seemed very. It was a nice sit down place, but it was economical. You would go up to a counter and you'd order, and it was a little nicer than fast food Mexican. But you could get a nice meal and a drink there for under $3. And they always had a jukebox, and we would always play Boston. We always liked to put Boston in on the jukebox when we would go there. Yeah, just thinking about Owensboro and growing up there. It was a good place to grow up. I had a friend up in Cleveland, a doctor, and she had her first child. And she was talking about, how excited she was and everything. She had a little boy. He was cute. And she asked if I ever planned on having any kids. And I said, well, if I ever did, I'd want to raise them where I grew up. A nice little Kentucky town. Kind of, pleasant and just relaxed. And she said, you mean sheltered? And I said, absolutely. So yeah, I think of this area as somewhat sheltered in a lot of ways. And I'm kind of proud of that. I'm glad I got to be brought up in an area like this. I went to Utica Elementary School growing up. Then I went to Burns Middle School in Owensboro, went to Apollo for high school, and I had a really good time. I feel privileged and lucky to have gotten to go to those schools. Burns in middle school was awkward, as it is for every kid. Apollo, I think, was just a lot of fun. I know when I was there, a lot of the kids hung out. It didn't matter which social group you were from. I remember everybody just kind of being friendly with everybody else. It wasn't as cliquish as some schools might have been. I hung out with a lot of kids that went to Davis County too, Davis County High. Remember being friends with the Roaches and the Schaefers and Catholic. I hung out with a lot of kids that went to Catholic. Especially the Paynes, real sweet people. I'm still friends with all of them today and think real highly of them. I remember the kids from Catholic man, they hung out in big groups. Me and my buddies, we get 3 or 4 guys together and go out at night. But the kids from Catholic, they would get like 20 kids together. If you went and hung out with some of those guys, you were going to hang out with a big group of people. So, yeah, and speaking of there's the old McDonald's on the left and what we always called the old Kmart because they built the new Kmart across town. But this on the left, just out of camera range, that was the old Kmart because it was there so long. And as you probably know, it closed not too long ago. But you could go in there even up to right when it closed, and it still felt like it did back in the 70s or 80s. It just stayed that way for forever. Up here on the left is the Starbucks in town, across from Kentucky Wesleyan College. Starbucks to me is kind of, I don't know, to me it just seems slightly out of place for Owensboro. It's a good location for it there next to the college. I love the independent coffee shops that have popped up in Owensboro, especially the Creme downtown. The Spot, which recently closed, I really loved the Spot. But there is a Starbucks. TD's Tough Decisions up here on the right. There's the Thinker statue. I used to go there a lot. They used to sell, and I haven't been in there in years, so I'm not even sure what they sell anymore. But they used to sell collectible records and CDs, and I spent a lot of time and money in there. I remember buying some cool promo posters that you just couldn't buy anywhere else. I remember buying the Sugar Cube's first album, and it was a promo copy, very collectible now. I've still got it. But you could find stuff like that there. I bought some Don Henley promo posters, and it was just a cool place to find rare stuff. And for Owensboro, that was kind of uncommon, back in the late 80s, early 90s when I was growing up. Owensboro High School's here on the left. I didn't have a whole lot of friends that went to Owensboro. My niece went there, though. She enjoyed it, but I never had a personal connection to Owensboro High School. And I honestly cannot remember where I was driving this particular day, but I'm driving down the road. I know when I was a kid, I used to really be into tropical fish. I had a fish tank. I had a saltwater and a freshwater fish tank. And I really enjoyed going looking for fish, and that was something me and my dad did a lot of. He liked fish when he was growing up, and we just really enjoyed going around and shopping for fish. And I remember he took me, one of my favorite pet stores when I was little was a place called Annette's. And there was this really sweet lady, kind of grandmotherly, but I always loved her. Her name was Annette, and she had Annette's Pets. It moved a couple of times, but I remember going and shopping for fish at Annette's, and it was just always fun. And she had good stuff. She had good prices. I remember buying ghost shrimp. She always had ghost shrimp, which were little shrimp they had transparent skin. And I'm sure I'm sure at the pet stores they're still fairly cheap. There on the left is the old, that used to be a Pizza Hut. Before that, I think it was a train station right here by the railroad tracks. Some new sculptures up here on the right that have been added to town. Also the art museum. Oh yeah, look at that. I love that sculpture there, the buffalo on the right there. There's the art museum on the right, going towards downtown. But yeah, Annette's, she had ghost shrimp, and that was the first place I ever saw those, and I loved them. I think they were like 3 for $1. I'm sure they're still cheap. They were pretty common, but I loved those. Also went to Danny's Pet Store, which was, I think, on 5th Street. And that was a little family ran Danny's Pets, and I got to where I just hung out there a lot. They loved talking about fish and animals, and I thought that was just a lot of fun. And I remember just... like my mom, if she couldn't find me, she would call Danny's Pets and ask them if I was there. There's the old Goldies in the theater there on the left. I remember seeing movies there when I was growing up. Brian Smith had a pet store too, and he also had Brian Smith Photography, but he had a pet store for a while, and I enjoyed going in there and talking to him. Really good guy. he opened a third business too, and he sold lingerie, and then he eventually stopped selling pets. So he had a photography and a lingerie business. So yeah, still he was always a fun guy to talk to, and I remember getting a lot of good deals on pets from him. And I think everybody who was into pets would go over to Harp's Pets in Evansville, which I think just recently closed. I've still got a really cool piece of coral that I bought at Harp's Pets that used to be in my saltwater fish tank. And I don't have fish anymore, but I'm still happy to have my really attractive piece of blue coral that used to be in my fish tank. Oh, Tropical Breeze. There was Tropical Breeze too. I didn't go in there often, but they had a good saltwater selection. They were over, yeah, kind of towards Gabe's Tower. So, oh, you know what? I think I might be going to the Crim right now. There's the bridge going over to Indiana. That was something else too. When I was little, we would go to Evansville, and they had two big malls at the time. They still have one of them. Their Washington Mall, what was it, Washington Square Mall, is pretty much a dead mall now. I think they've got some maybe doctor's offices and things like that in it. It's still there, I believe. I was there, and I'm sure it's been a couple years since I was there. When I go over to Evansville, I like to stick my head in there, though. But Evansville just seemed like such a big city to me when I was little. And I remember I joke halfway, but I'm halfway serious, too. I was probably 12 or 13 before I realized Evansville was not on the same level as Paris and London and New York City. Like, I just assumed Evansville was one of the major cities in the world, after growing up in areas like Calhoun and Utica and Owensboro. But I always enjoyed Evansville, and Evansville was one of the first places I remember, speaking of music, there was a guy in a record store in Evansville telling me about bootleg CDs, and I did not know what that was, and I had to look that up. And that's a story for another day. Of course, you got the River Park Center up here on the right. I never really did much there. I remember seeing a couple plays there. They kind of built it when I was coming up. I remember seeing some music there one night, just some locals playing kind of at a little cafe. And I don't even know if that little cafe is still there. My late cousin Matt Atkins, he used to do work out there. And I remember he was helping with some music and sound and lights for a prom one night. And I went over there and helped him. I helped them with some music. I helped them with the smoke machine also. Yeah, there's the Crim on the right. Yeah, I think this is right when the whole coronavirus stuff started, and they were doing, kind of drive by and they'd bring it to your car orders. We just ordered some coffee. And I really like, I know they've been through a few owners, but I like the Crim. And I always call it the Crim, but it might be the Cream. And I've even asked people that work there what's the pronunciation, and I don't think they're sure. But have you been to this coffee shop? This is probably one of my favorite coffee shops, period. And I go to a lot of coffee shops. It's definitely one of my favorites in Kentucky. This one and Purdy's in Richmond are two of my just all-time favorite coffee shops. I like the Crim because it's just so cozy inside. Next time I'm in town, I'll have to take my camera in there and just show you how pretty it is if you haven't seen. But it's very attractive. It's in an old downtown building, and it just looks like a coffee shop should look. If a film producer was trying to film something in just a perfect coffee shop setting, they could use the Crim as a filming location. And there's a really, really sweet girl that works in there, Ashley. And I always think of her, I jokingly refer to her as the mayor of Owensboro. I think everybody knows her. She's just a good person. She went on a mission trip not too long ago, and she was selling mugs to help raise money for her mission trip. Here comes our coffee. She was selling mugs for her mission trip. And those mission trips, yeah, I know it's fun to travel somewhere and it's an adventure and everything, but those are work. I've had several friends go on those. You've got to be selfless to do that kind of thing. Yeah, but I really like the crim. Usually, my family around Christmas time, they'll try to get me. I know I've got a couple of T-shirts and I've got a mug from the crim, and it's those are just nice things to have. I'm happy to have those. I'm big on coffee mugs. When we travel, that's something I like to collect, and I pick them up if I'm at a nice independent coffee shop and they have a nice mug, I'll pick one up. Bed and breakfasts usually sell a nice mug, and I've gotten into picking those up when we stop somewhere unique and nice. And downtown Owensboro, and I'm really going to date myself here, I barely remember as a little kid going into Kresge's. Yeah, you remember Kresge's? Yeah, I'm sure you don't. But I remember that being downtown, and then when I was living in the area, 80s, 90s, downtown was kind of dead. There wasn't a whole lot going on. I mean, it almost had a don't go down there kind of vibe. And some new businesses that have moved in, like the Crim, have really breathed life into it and made it nice again. And of course, I'm sure you've seen the downtown, the playground and all that, which I know some locals aren't thrilled with because of the price tag attached with it, but it is gorgeous. And when I talk to people that aren't from Owensboro, if they've been to Owensboro, they're always talking about that playground. And again, I don't think I drove by it on this particular day. I should have, and I will. I just didn't on that particular day. If you continue going up, if you went straight, approximately, you'd hit the old Executive Inn area, which was demolished in 2008. I'm pretty sure it was 2008. And that was just a huge hotel. I think they built it in the mid-70s. And it was a really thriving, happening place at one time. It was really the trademark. When you thought of Owensboro, you thought of the Executive Inn. And it was sad that it had to go. But I heard it was falling into the river. I know some people that work there actually told me there were some gaps that you could see in the walls, and it was time for it to go. Saw a lot of good concerts there. Remember seeing the Fabulous Thunderbirds, Kansas, Survivor. I saw, quote, the Byrds open up for Survivor, and it was actually one of the Byrds' drummers touring with a bunch of young guys as the Byrds, which was kind of odd. That unique also. I'm glad I got to see that show. I know I saw some other shows there. 38 Special. I've still got all my ticket stubs. I actually put scans of most of my ticket stubs on my blog at kentuckytravels.blogspot.com. Speaking of music, I know up on the left, out of range here, is the Bluegrass Hall of Fame and Museum that's in Owensboro, which is nice. I went there with my brother-in-law a few months back, and that was pretty cool. I hope it does well. It's not big. You can cover it in an hour or two. You could spend a lot more time there if you wanted to read everything, but it's small. If you've been to the Country Music Hall of Fame or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's extremely small, but it's nice, and they're doing a real respectable job with it. And it's nice that it's in Owensboro. So my brother-in-law, I believe, is a member. I think he had a free ticket that he got me in with, and I was appreciative. Yeah, and actually, I mentioned Danny's earlier. It was up here on the right. I think this bus, I think it was right over, it was in this area. Yeah, Danny's Pets. And I just used to go there and hang out all the time. I was so into fish at one time. I got rid of my bed in my bedroom, and I was sleeping on a fold-out futon. I had, I want to say, 2 30-gallon fish tanks and a 29-gallon, and several small fish tanks. I used to raise fish. I had platies and swordtails. They were really reproductive, and I'd have a fish that would have a bunch of those. I'd raise them and then take them back to the pet stores and trade them. And yeah, you've got the old theater up here, the old church. It's the funeral home on the left. And my grandma used to live up here. And this was a nice location. And I have a lot of sentimental attachment to this area. I used to park at her house when the parade was around. We would park at her house and walk up to the parade, and that was always fun. I'd also park here. A friend of mine, Vernon, he worked in this area, and he's the friend that I went to a lot of concerts with. And I would meet him at his work. I'd park at my grandma's house. I'd go meet him at his work, and we would walk down to the Executive Inn and see shows. Oh, I saw Foreigner too. That was a great show. And I know there were Canned Heat. I remember seeing Canned Heat. My great grandma lived right through here for a while. She lived to be 101, and she lived independently up until her last 2 weeks. And that's one of those things. I think she was born in 1898. And I think to myself, she almost made it to three, living in 3 different centuries. I wish I had bought a camera to videotape her. A camera at that point was, way out of my price range. But I still should have tried to have bought one and filmed her and had her tell some stories. Because she grew up with Civil War veterans. She just had a ton of history, and, well, when someone passes away, that history is totally lost. Up here on the right, again, right out of camera range, is Mr. Cooper's Barber Shop. And I had my very first haircut there. And I believe he is still barbering. So he's been in practice a long time. There's the fire station on the right. The art museum, which we're about to pass again up ahead, I remember being in, I want to say, elementary school, and we would go there each year before Christmas, and they used to have what we called the Christmas Tree Museum. In fact, I always thought this was just the Christmas Tree Museum. I didn't realize it was the art museum. And the Christmas tree thing was just a seasonal event. But that was always cool. I remember everybody got excited about going to see the Christmas trees. I went into the art museum. It's been a few years, but I thought it would be fun to go there. It's only a few bucks to get in, but they were having a private event the day I went. And you could get in for free, but a good chunk of the museum was closed. And I don't like it when a place does that. Bring your A game every day. If you're trying to be a reputable museum, make sure you've got your exhibits open, all of them, all the time. I know they're working with what they can, but... Used to be an IGA grocery store up here, kind of on the right. My friend Christy used to work there, and a buddy I knew from school, Josh. It was a cute little store, and I always liked it. I hate to see those old grocery stores gone. J.R. Miller Boulevard, I remember that was kind of a new thing at one point. And I honestly have no idea where I'm driving at this point. I think I might have just been driving around. Yeah, well, actually, I think we're driving up towards the hospital, the new hospital. And I remember Mercy Hospital, which isn't quite near where we're at right now. But that was one of the old hospitals. And that was always, I always had family members in there, it seemed. And I remember when my dad had his first heart attack, going there, kind of as a young kid. And I remember there was a nun. They always had the nuns there. And this little nun kind of took me into a little waiting room, and there were some cartoons, and she brought me a Coke. And she could not have been any sweeter to me. And it's you remember those times when people are, kind and generous and sweet when you're having a tough time. And that's one of those things that'll always stick in my brain. Through this area, man, I remember there was a baseball card shop when I was probably 8 or 9 that was opened up kind of in this area. And that back when baseball cards were huge, and it was a lot of fun going in there. I can't remember the name of the lady that ran it, but she was really nice, and I used to go in there and trade Garbage Pail Kids with her. I know there's Bruner's Collectibles up through here too. They sell old coins, and things like that. Yeah, mostly coins. And I've gone in there recently. They have good deals. Their prices are competitive, and they have some really cool, unique items. And I've found, I'll pick up the occasional Civil War token or Confederate bill, and they've had some very reasonable prices. I'd say if you're looking for something and they've got it, you're not going to find it any cheaper on eBay or anywhere else. And they're knowledgeable. They've given me all sorts of knowledge, and I've went in there and just asked them questions. Good people running that place. And of course, in the distance, you can see Gabe's Tower, which just got taken down. Oh, and yeah, up through here on the left is where Tropical Breeze Pets used to be. On up a little bit. Also, up here on the right, there's a little shopping plaza down. If you turn right here in a little bit, used to be Columbus Comics. And when I was a kid, that was just a cool place to go. I'd hang out there a lot too when I was, probably like in middle school. And they had a 5 for $1 comics area, and you could take $1 in there and walk out with 5, usually old comics, and that was a lot of fun. I used to go in there, and they always had the Dungeons and Dragons miniatures, and I went from being into comics to being into miniatures, and I still paint toy soldiers. I like historic stuff these days, but I paint mostly Civil War, Alamo, World War II. Yeah, right there on the right, Gabe's Tower, and you can see that it's partially, they were taking down part of it at that time. And it's sad because, they just took the whole thing down. And it was another, just kind of like the Executive Inn. It was just something you thought of Owensboro, you thought of the Executive Inn, you thought of Gabe's Tower. I know when I travel these days, a lot of people bring up Moonlight Barbecue. And I like Moonlight, but I also like Old South, and I like Old Hickory. Oh yeah, driving up towards the cemetery. I need to, and I've filmed in this cemetery before. A lot of my family is up in this cemetery. My mom and dad have bought plots. My dad is there right now. My grandma, my grandma, my great grandma, and their spouses. I never met their spouses. They died before I came along. My cousin, my aunt, another uncle, another cousin, a lot of family members up in this cemetery, and it's pretty. And we just passed a grocery store on the right. My friend Kristen used to work there when we were younger, and that's a grocery store that's been there for a while, been there forever, and I'm glad it's still there. And it's another one I've gone into and just bought a Coke or something just for nostalgia's sake. Oh, actually, I am driving out to the cemetery on this day. But yeah, I have a ton of family in the cemetery, and I stop by here just about every time I come to Owensboro. Oh, okay, I'm back out on Frederica. Yeah, the museum, the Owensboro Museum, used to be on the left down this way, and I remember going there as a kid, and that was a lot of fun. I really remember that just being a great, great museum, and just blowing my mind. It was, even back then, I think it was really good for Owensboro. And the Owensboro Museum has moved out. It's actually by the Krim coffee shop that we went to earlier, and it's well, I've gone in there. I went in there once and just walked through the gift shop. I didn't have time to go through the museum. And probably 3 or 4 times since then, I've gone in when I've had time in Owensboro, and it's been closed. I think they're closed on Mondays. I went on a Monday once, and I went when the whole coronavirus thing started, back before all the businesses were totally closed. And it was closed. So yeah, my timing has just been terrible. I know there used to be a video rental place right up here on the left. And it was one of the first, when VCRs and videos were a big thing. It was one of the first places I remember renting a video. Yeah, that's something else the kids can't, understand now with Netflix and everything. I do remember you would, if a kid was having a big birthday party, they might rent a VCR and 4 or 5 tapes for their birthday party. And then there was a point where VCRs, got to where they were around a couple $100, and you could afford one. It was a stretch, but you could afford one. And I remember going with my dad when we bought our first VCR, and that was a big deal. Like, it was really exciting. I remember we bought it in Calhoun, and my dad talked the guy down a few bucks, and he got the guy to throw in a few blank tapes so we could actually tape stuff off the TV. I remember going to a party once when I was in grade school. They were renting some videos, and I asked my mom if I could go, and she said, "What movies are they showing?" And they said Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Friday the 13th. I heard that on the phone. I looked at my mom and I said Star Wars and Indiana Jones. So she let me go. And that was the first time I saw a Friday the 13th movie, and I had nightmares about it for weeks. And I've loved Friday the 13th ever since. Yeah, but it was a big deal. People would really sit around and watch the movie. You weren't multitasking. Ponderosa Steakhouse used to be up here on the right. And then that little restaurant has been several other businesses. I think it was most recently a really good pizza shop that I liked a lot. And it was a coffee shop, maybe 5-10 years ago. Kmart was up here, and it just recently vacated, which was just tragic. There's a shoe place in part of the shopping area now. Used to be a movie theater up here right in the corner of the shopping plaza. And I remember going to a lot of movies there and really, really loving that movie theater. It's now a church. I remember seeing the Roddy Piper movie, They Live, with my cousin Matt and his dad. And we walked out of there going, man, that was the greatest movie ever. And people were making fun of it. We loved it, though, and I still love that movie. That is, if you know anything about literature, and there used to be a pizza place up here that my friend Buddy used to work at. If you know anything about literature, They Live is actually a retelling of Plato's cave parable. If you know what I'm talking about, that's some deep stuff. But They Live, that is such a great movie. And it's timeless. It's anytime you watch it, it's relevant. Yeah, we used to come here a lot. I remember in the Kmart there used to be a cigarette vending machine. And that's such a foreign concept now, I think. Especially just out in the public where kids could buy them. Long John Silver's is up here on the right. That Long John Silver's has been there forever. The McDonald's on the left was recently redone. But I remember hanging out there a lot as a kid. I like Long John Silver's. I don't eat there often, though. But, in fact, I think that Long John Silver's was the last one I ate at. My wife does not like it. So, once a year or so, maybe twice a year, I stop at a Long John Silver's when I'm on a trip without my wife. And I don't drive by it in this video, but there's the sports center out on the other side of town. I've seen some basketball games there. And when I was a kid, my dad used to take me to see pro wrestling. And man, that was a lot of fun. Anybody else go see pro wrestling out at the sports center? We saw a lot of the guys before they became big deals. And I remember seeing The Undertaker when he was the Master of Pain, wrestling Jerry the King Lawler. And Lawler threw a fireball in his face. And the place was just, the place went nuts. I remember seeing the Poffo brothers, Randy Savage and Lanny Poffo. And those guys are legends now. The Rock and Roll Express, King Kong Bundy, Jim Neidhart. I remember seeing a lot of those guys before they became big. Coco Ware, he was probably one of my favorites. Hillbilly Jim, I never saw him, but I met him at the Frankfurt Book Fair several years ago, and he is just a super swell guy. I got my picture taken with him, and I put my arm around him, and that dude is a rock. He is still in great shape, and he's got to be, in his 60s. But you can tell he takes care of himself, and I think he's a good, solid person, and a good, decent Kentuckian. I read his autobiography, too, which was fun. Yeah, and I remember, too, seeing Sid Vicious when he was humongous. He was called Humongous. The Steiner brothers, I remember being there, at least the younger Steiner brother. But that was just a lot of fun. I remember getting Jeff Jarrett's autograph. I remember getting Kerry Von Erich's autograph. Yeah, Kerry Von Erich was there, and he was a big deal even at that time. Good times, good times. And driving up towards the mall, and again, the mall in Owensboro. When I was in middle school, and when I went to Burns Middle School, me and my cousin Matt used to walk. Some Fridays we'd walk from school after school was over to the mall, and we would spend a buck or two at the arcade, and then there was a pizza place that we would go and get pizza at for dinner. And I can't remember the name of it. I want to say it was like Luigi's or something like that. Oh, and there was Big Lots used to be here on the right, but it just moved. And I think at this point I can't remember if it was there or not, but yeah, so there was this pizza place at the mall, and it was the first time I remember seeing the wood fire ovens where they kind of rotate, and you get your pizza all nice and hot and fresh and all that. And I think for $3 you could get a piece of pizza and a drink, and it was a really big piece of pizza, and we loved that. That little pizza place wasn't there very long. It was next to where Disc Jockey used to be. But there was a little guy that ran it, and he was really nice, and we always enjoyed talking to him. Somewhere, again, my late cousin Matt, I remember we took a video camera into the mall back in high school and videotaped a lot. And I think it was for a school project of his, and I helped him with it. And I don't know what happened to that video, but I'd sure love to come across it again. I asked his sister. She had a lot of his old videos if she ever came across it, but she said she didn't. Yeah, there was the Books A Million used to be up here on the right up until just recently with the Joe Muggs Coffee. I love Books A Million. There's not even one in Lexington, but I've bought one of their little membership, their Millionaires Club cards, just to get the discount because we stop at them as often as we can. And I like their Joe Muggs coffee. It's consistently good. Yeah, the Big Lots moved into where, and I'm 99% sure Walmart was there before it became the giant Walmart across the road. Yeah, right there. Actually, I don't think Big Lots has quite moved in yet, and Books A Million just moved out. But I love that Books A Million. It was always sad, though. You would go in and they had all that space. They had a lot of space, but you didn't see a whole lot of people shopping there. And towards the end, they were getting into the buying and selling thing, which I like that. I like that model. But I don't think it worked for that Books A Million. It was a nice store that was starting to look a little cluttered with used stuff. Oh no, okay, yeah, the Big Lots moved into where Hobby Lobby used to be. So yeah, there was a Hobby Lobby there. And maybe, I can't remember, the Walmart was right around here somewhere. There used to be a video rental store right here, and I remember my cousin Matt and me going in there and renting Chopping Mall, another great horror movie that I'm not sure if it translates well now, but it was a fun, weird little horror movie. Showbiz Pizza used to be right up through here too. Anybody remember Showbiz Pizza? I still love Showbiz Pizza. They're over in West Virginia. There's Billy Bob's Pizza. Was it Billy Bob's Pizza? It's not called Showbiz Pizza. It's Billy Bob's Pizza something. And they've still got the old Rockefeller Explosion, the old show with Fats and the Bear and all of those characters. It's basically an old Showbiz Pizza. But we used to go to Showbiz Pizza here all the time, and I loved it. And Service Merchandise used to be up here. My friend Beth worked at Service Merchandise. It's now a church right here on the right. And that's... yeah, I'm not sure if a store like that could exist now, the way it was set up. But it was a cool store, and I remember going in there and getting... it was the kind of place you might get like a nice watch gift for a friend. I know when I was younger, I loved G.I. Joe. I had my friend Beth bought me from there. I think she might have used her employee discount, but she bought me a G.I. Joe 25th anniversary watch that was really cute. I've still got it. And Chi Chi's used to be right here. Do you remember Chi Chi's? They had the greatest buffet ever. It was like $5 or $6. And they just had great cheese, great desserts. It was such a great place to go. And I think in Pennsylvania somebody ate at a Chi Chi's and there was some poisoning incident, food poisoning, and that was the end of Chi Chi's. And I don't want to name the current food chains that have had similar and even worse issues that have survived, but times have changed. But I love Chi Chi's. That was just a great restaurant. And we're going up, yeah. This is again middle of March, and we had ordered Panera takeout. I was actually in Owensboro right as the whole pandemic thing was happening, and there were announcements that places were going to be closing and all of that. We actually ate in this Panera, I think, the night before this. But they were closing up early as things were changing at that moment. So yeah, we stopped here to get takeout. I like Panera. It's a chain that I think highly of. It's a little bready. They're big on bread, but it's good bread. And I like their broccoli and cheese soup. I like their French onion soup. And I like just about every sandwich that they have, and my wife likes their salads. And it's cozy, too. I know, right before all of this hit, we were in a Panera, and they were really pushing their, I think it was $8 or $9 coffee, $8 or $9 a month coffee club, and I think it was you could go in and just get coffee anytime you wanted for $8 or $9. And there was a period that I would have milked that deal for all it was worth. Yeah. And oh yeah, okay, so we're driving back over towards the old mall, or the mall. I mentioned Lincoln Mall. I actually put up a video of me, my friend Brent and I walking through Lincoln Mall. So check that out. It's on the same YouTube channel. I loved Lincoln Mall growing up, though, because it was the dead mall. And there's the Town Square Mall up here on the right. And it was always a fun hangout, though. Up here on the right is Grandy's, which is one of those chains that was bigger at one point, and I think it's just down to a few locations, including this one here in Owensboro. When I was younger, I remember, I was like in middle school. I remember winning on 96 STO. I remember winning a trivia contest that they used to do in the mornings. I actually won it a couple times. You won a dozen Grandy's cinnamon rolls and a mug with Grandy's on it that you could take in there for free coffee refills for life. It was a plastic mug, and I remember they fell apart after a while. But I wonder if I still had one of those mugs, if they would still honor that. They've remodeled in there, which they needed to. I always remember Grandy's had good cinnamon rolls, and they had good food, good comfort food. Probably not the most healthy, but this was the main entrance to the mall, I always remember, and I remember Ruby Tuesdays used to be here, and that was the kind of place you'd go for somebody's birthday. It was kind of fancy by our standards at the time. And Osco Drugs, I think Osco Drugs was right here on the right, and that was one of the last original stores that was still there. I had a buddy named Kerry that worked there for several years. And I think it was J.C. Penney's, or one of the big anchor stores used to be right through here. There used to be a fountain in the middle of the mall, and you'd throw pennies in, and it was really cool. And there was I think a Baskin and Robbins ice cream place. You get ice cream, you go sit by the fountain. It was Sears. This was a Sears. Used to be a really nice, sweet little thing to do when you were young. Oh, the Sears catalog. I remember ordering stuff through the Sears catalog and the JCPenney catalog. That was always a big deal when you were a kid. You'd get those catalogs and look through them because they had all the cool toys. One year for my birthday, my parents ordered me Castle Grayskull through the Sears catalog. I remember going to the mall and picking that up, and that was massive. As a little kid, I mean, that was just the coolest thing. It was a big skull play set, and it just didn't get any cooler than that. There was Thornberry Toys, and I think it was Woolsey's. I can't remember which one it was first, and then later on it became a KB Toys in the mall, and that was always, you always wanted to go there when you were a little kid. Spencer's was always at the mall. Oh, I always loved at Halloween. They would have those big, gorgeous latex Halloween masks. That were like 60, $70. And then after Halloween, they'd be 50% off. And then a few weeks later, they'd be another 50% off. And I remember getting this big, crazy looking monster mask that was, $70, I think originally. I got it for 15. And it was so big, it covered most of my body. And me and my friend Brent, his grandma made him a cloak for someone that was about 8 feet tall. I would put that mask on and that cloak, and then I would get up on his shoulders, and it was so creepy because I'm a short person, and Brent's kind of tall, but you would see us, and you could tell that in that mask you could see human eyes at the top. It was just a cool, creepy little two-person costume. I remember going through this entrance right here, and the arcade was on the left, right there on the left. And my two favorite games growing up were Rampage and Gauntlet. And those were like, two games that I'd spend a few bucks playing them. And it was just a lot of fun. Cute little games. My buddy Brad, I remember right after high school, he had an apartment just about there in front of us in one of those buildings back there. And he was working for Coke. And he was like the first guy out of high school who had his own place. And we would just go hang out there, and it was a lot of fun. But here at the mall, this area still seems very familiar to me. And it still seems it's very much the way it was, in a lot of ways, even in the 80s and 90s.